right, we have launched our first live stream. My name is Jim Bennett. Welcome to Consensus with Canonizer. This is live out into the world. Everybody is seeing this. Are we excited? We've got Brent.
Yay!
Hello. We are live.
Can you hear me now?
So since we're live, I'd like to start with a rather interesting question. Is this the address you sent us what's available for the live streaming? Or is there a YouTube link?
No. I'm going to put the YouTube link in the referral. Can you guys see the chat there?
Yeah.
That is the YouTube link. I'm sending that off to my family. I'm saying, please watch our live stream. It just started. And then sending the link. So here we are, live and in colors. One person is watching.
Cool. But we don't have the link.
Yeah, I haven't seen the link yet.
Oh, I put it in the chat. I will put it in the
chat,
in the comments. I just sent you it via text. You should have it momentarily. So we will have hordes of viewers. We may want to delete this after we do it, because this will be on our YouTube channel forever until we delete it. We have 2 viewers. 3 viewers.
Hello.
I still haven't seen the YouTube link.
Hello to our hordes of viewers. Welcome to Consensus with Canonizer. I just got a text from my son Jamie saying, "What am I watching?"
You're watching the future, boy.
Something about this is the future. So we are doing a podcast for Canonizer. It's called Consensus with Canonizer, and it's going to be a live stream. And this is the first time we've tried to live stream. Okay, so my daughter says, "Sup, I am technically in class and you're all muted, but excited to be here." Jamie says, "What's up?" So apparently it's out there. Bennett's are watching us.
And we still don't have it.
I texted it to you.
Except you didn't. I have not received it.
I haven't received it.
Okay,
oh, there.
Let's see.
I got that.
3 viewers, says Eliza. Someone call Ellen.
Okay, now I got it.
All right, so you got it. All right, so send that out to your family and friends. We are going to have millions of people watching this before the hour is over. Who's excited?
I'm excited.
You're all supposed to say, I'm excited. All right, so we have, those of you who are watching live, we have done this. We've done a few run-throughs that we have recorded and watched for our own edification. But the goal here is to offer different topics that we can discuss that are discussed on Canonizer. The goal of Canonizer is to find consensus on controversial topics. So each of us is going to discuss a different controversial topic, and we will put the link to those topics in the chat here so that you will have the opportunity to see what's going on. Jamie says he's at work. That's fine. But hopefully you guys can vote and weigh in and see if we've changed your mind, if the discussion has changed your ideas on these controversial topics, or if you still want to stay where you are, see if we've built or changed or modified the consensus in any way. So thank you. You can watch it with the mute on, see what happens, but we'll ask you to weigh in as we go. So here we are. And Kelly, do you have the initial topic that you wanted to talk about?
Yes, they are. If you are controlling the share screen, I have the scroll up there, and you can decide which one we want to start with.
That's nice.
Brent.
Brent, let's talk about too many streaming services.
Cool. Well, basically, I
You
had
think-
the same. Yeah, I had when digital MP3s, and there were MP3 players way back when, and Napster was a thing, and all that kind of stuff. It was the same kind of mess. You couldn't buy MP3s, and people and all these different companies tried to charge you for them, and it was just a mess. And I says, I'm ignoring all this. I'm just gonna pirate all this stuff. And eventually it became easier to buy the stuff than to pirate the stuff. So then I finally switched over. And now it seems like we're the same place with movies. It's just a horrible mess. There's too many streaming services. It's too hard. Every time you hear about some content you want to watch, you go out and realize you don't have a membership. And then after you watch that one service, you look at what they provide, and you don't want anything else from them. And so you have to cancel. And anyway, it just drives me crazy. But so I'm committed to, if I want to watch stuff, I'm going to pirate it all. Go to Napster.
I might
Bay.
suggest using a different term. Our audience is vast and growing, and there just might be somebody from the FBI or somebody like that that's watching. So maybe you could suggest a different term.
Okay.
Finding alternative means to view your favorite shows.
Okay, yeah, I'll find out. There we go.
I may or may not involve sailing the high seas.
So I can't mention the
we have
pirates or anything like that.
Eliza Bennett says, yes, there are too many streaming services, and my parents have stopped paying for all of them. So we have someone in the audience that is in agreement with you on one thing, but I think probably wouldn't have a hard time with them if her parents would somehow spring for additional streaming services. Yeah. So Brent, your camp then, what does your camp say on this?
If you go down to the camp, it says, I guess I can't say that online, or the FBI will show it up.
So your camp says that piracy is one solution?
Yeah, and read it.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Hypothetically.
Because you, of course, would never do anything illegal and never download something that you hadn't paid for.
Yeah, unless what I was doing was more sinful than that, i.e. supporting selfish people that all want to be the boss of everyone.
It's harder and harder to pirate things now because they're very good at catching you. You have to have a VPN.
Yeah.
But even some VPNs, a lot of these services are figuring out how to find out who you are, even with a VPN. I hear, hypothetically, because I, of course, have never had any firsthand experience doing anything like this.
Okay, now I'm catching up.
Are there any other camps then is there anybody? Yeah. Piracy is one solution is the only camp we've got under this topic. Is that right?
That's the only, yeah. So far.
I would suggest another one, that something along the lines of get more family and friends to subscribe and share their subscription with you. Oh. That's what we're doing with my family. So we have, I'm looking at them right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 10 different streaming services because each member of my family has provided one or two.
But Netflix is shutting down on that, right? Aren't the streaming services start the same thing? They're cracking down on that, not letting you do that.
Well, we have Hulu Live TV, which is ridiculously expensive, but I have people in my family that like to watch sports for some reason, and you can only do that on live television. But when you have Hulu Live TV, we have a Disney Plus subscription that just sort of is bundled with it without any extra money. We canceled our Disney Plus subscription and then found out we still have one. So the streaming services that we've had before are Disney Plus, Hulu. Oh, Jetty's asking, how do I comment on the live stream? Jamie and Eliza, can you explain to your brother how to comment on the live stream? Because I'm not sure how you're doing it. I don't know. I'm just commenting on YouTube, Eliza says. So the other comments that we've gotten, hells yeah, piracy, JK government, if you're watching. Also, Reddit will always show you the way to priacy, and then it's corrected as piracy. So just want to get the comments in here, make sure that people are up here. So no. So Disney Plus, Hulu, Netflix. Netflix is paid for by T-Mobile, by my cell phone provider, except they've kind of upped it because now they'll only pay for the version that offers ads because Netflix keeps getting more expensive. Also, Paramount Plus, Max, and Amazon Prime. At different times, we've had all of those channels, and it's right now all we have now is Hulu and Netflix and Disney Plus by default, and that's fine by me. But every now and then something comes out where it's like, oh, I wish I could watch it on something else.
Yeah,
I mean, is there a solution here? Because I don't see a solution other than the idea of the government essentially buying all of these services and providing and wiping out the free market on that.
No, Canonizer's the solution. All of these guys that are saying, I want to be the boss, I want to be the boss. Instead of wanting to be the boss, they should say, hey, we all need to work together. And we need to come up with a service that's easy for everyone to use. And let's build consensus around the best way to do that and do it that way. You don't want the government to get involved in, that'll just ruin it if the government does it. But the people that instead of, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just say, I remember back when I first got married and we got cable TV. And this was this newfangled thing because when I was growing up, we had ABC, CBS, NBC, and we had PBS. Somewhere along the way, those rascals at Fox showed up. And then suddenly we had 40 channels of TV that we could watch. Yeah. And it turned out with those 40 channels, I still watched Gilligan's Island reruns. And so my solution is hopefully in a competitive marketplace, somebody's going to sell a product that makes it worth purchasing. Because I think on the whole, I'm disappointed in most anything. I like a couple of shows on Apple TV. We have Apple TV. And that's it.
I think I've seen one show on Apple TV and one show that I want to watch on Amazon Prime, and I'm like, that's not enough.
Watch Severance, man. Watch Severance.
Oh yeah, Severance. I do want to see Severance. I saw the pilot episode to Severance was free, and so they let you watch that. So that got me hooked. So yeah, I guess I should. I don't know.
So we also have Amazon. So we're paying for Amazon and Apple and paying that for our kids.
Well, my daughter, who's in the chat, used to pay for a Prime subscription and has canceled it. And so we now no longer have Prime. However, my mother has Prime, and I went to help her set it up, and I ended up, logging into Prime on my video app on my phone. So I now
Hey, Jim, can you come over to my house?
Prime. And just, you want my mother's subscription?
No. Hypothetically.
No. Hypothetically, that would never happen. Yes, Jamie says grandma for the win. So we've got an argument mark about 4chan. Apparently, some of our viewers are not fans. So this is fun. What did Grandma do? I still have this muted. Grandma, I have Grandma's Amazon Prime on my app, Eliza. So she has Prime and Apple TV. Oh, we don't have Apple TV anymore. Like whenever anybody upgrades one of their Apple devices, my sons we gave them we gave them iPads for their birthday last month. Every time you get a new Apple device, you get a 3-month subscription to Apple TV. And so that's the way we've watched Ted Lasso, and we've watched Shrinking and a number of other things that are on Apple TV. and then we cram it all in at once because the thing expires after 3 months. So,
And maybe that's
all
a
right,
solution. Maybe that's what I'm going to offer as a competing camp. But get the free version, watch everything, unsubscribe, go to the next ones, watch everything, unsubscribe.
There you go. What a hassle! It's easy. It's easier to pirate than it is to do that.
I'm being told
Theoretically, of course.
Theoretically, it is.
Theoretically. All right, Canonizer actually is the best platform to be able to figure out a solution to this, because I know that a lot of people in the entertainment industry have complained that there are too many channels for entertainment. And Netflix was just asked, the president of Netflix was just asked yesterday, are you destroying Hollywood? And essentially he said, we're saving Hollywood. And that the theatrical experience is gone now. People don't care about going to movies. And that makes me kind of sad, because I love going to movies and I still want to go to movies, but there's no denying the fact that streaming has, to a large degree, disrupted the traditional model of movies being in a theater. And, I'm looking forward, for instance, to the Happy Gilmore sequel, but it's being done by Netflix. It's going to show up on my Netflix subscription the day it comes out. Why would I go to a movie theater to watch it then? So I think there's a whole lot of things happening here with regard to streaming that Canonizer could be very helpful in sorting out, because I don't think a lot of people understand how to navigate the new media landscape. So Brent, I think you're on to something.
Yeah, if all the big companies, instead of saying, I want to be the boss and boss of everybody, do it bottom up and leaderless and work together. Of course, to do that, you need a tool like Canonizer, but you don't need it. You can do it without Canonizer, but Canonizer makes it a lot easier. But yeah.
Jim, I think that is a good segue to our next topic.
Which is?
Why doesn't anybody watch the Academy Awards anymore?
There we go.
Okay, is that your topic, Kelly?
That would be my topic.
Academy Award voters. Now, see, that's a different article, different point, though, because you got there in that camp.
I use that as a lead into that Academy Award voters actually need to watch the movies, and I think it goes down to the point that nobody else is watching them. So why is the Academy Awards sucking? When I was growing up, it was the one thing everybody gathered around the TV. Like they'd watch the Super Bowl every year and you'd watch the Academy Awards every year. And what has caused their decline? Steady decline over the last probably 30 years.
Yeah, I used to always watch it, but I never do anymore. I don't know why.
And streaming services can be blamed for some of maybe the more recent stuff, but even that, their movies are now considered candidates for Academy Awards.
That's true. I can remember staying up late to find out who won Best Picture, particularly in 1977, because it was the year Star Wars was nominated. And I, as a 9-year-old kid, was absolutely certain that Star Wars, everybody in the world knew that Star Wars was the greatest movie that had ever been made or ever would be made. And of course, it was going to win the Best Picture Oscar. And I was heartbroken when it did not. And do you know what did?
I'm trying to remember. I bet you.
It was the divorce legal one. Kramer versus Kramer?
No, Kramer versus Kramer, I think, was the year before. Or maybe the year after. No, the year before was 76. That was Rocky. And in fact, my parents were in the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion when Rocky won Best Picture. So 76, it was Rocky. 77, it was... In 78, it was Kramer versus Kramer.
Annie Hall.
Annie Hall. Friggin' Woody Allen. Really? Woody Allen beats out Star Wars? I went to my class the next day, 5th grade, Mrs. Portugal's class, and Philip Golden was heartbroken and said, we need to throw away all of our Star Wars action figures because the Academy has told us that it is not the great movie we thought it was. So that's the only Star Wars movie that's ever been nominated for anything significant. Okay, and my daughter says, I'm literally just starting all these topics on Canonizer. So we've got a convert here, I think. We're getting some topics here. We're moving forward.
I want to go back. Like, I'm just going to pick a year at random here. 1992. You had 5 movies that were nominated for Best Picture. Unforgiven, fantastic movie. Crying Game, I didn't watch, but I know what it's about. A Few Good Men, fantastic. Howard's End, it was okay. Son of a Woman, fantastic. And when you compare that to this year, there's 10 nominees, and they're awful. And Nora, I mean, that's the one that won, and it's about a Russian prostitute, and it had a box office of about $10 million. Nobody saw it. The Brutalist, never saw that one. Complete Unknown, never saw that one. Conclave, I saw that on Apple TV. Dune 2, you can make it. I think that was a decent show. Emilia Perez, again, another one nobody saw. I'm Still Here, nobody saw. Nickel Boys, nobody saw. The Substance, nobody saw. And Wicked. And so you have all these movies that nobody's ever heard of, and they're picking the most random movie that is unseen by everybody, and the whole thing would be untasteful to the vast majority of middle America who movies are made for. I think I'm talking myself into why nobody's watching the Academy Awards right there. They're too preachy, and they focus on unseen niche films.
Yeah. Our comments here, Jamie Bennett says, I've seen a good amount of them. Kelly, I think you should watch some more movies. Katie Cassidy has weighed in and says, we watch TikToks. So we've got a Cassidy in the chat as well. Kelly, Eliza has issued the Watch All the Oscar Noms Challenge. So
I think that's a great idea, but since the Oscar nominee voters didn't have to watch these movies, why should I? Isn't that the most ridiculous thing you've heard?
Well, it's funny because the logistical thinking behind having 10 nominees, because up until about, I think, 10 years ago, it might have been even more recent than that, every category only had 5 nominees.
Yes.
And I think still every category besides Best Picture has 5 nominees, but they expanded the Best Picture nominee to 10 in order to be able to include movies that people have seen. Because this is not the first time, this is not a new phenomenon. This is not the first time people have complained, oh golly, the big movies, nobody's seen any of the movies that have been nominated. You went back to 1992, but if you were to go back to a number of those years in times past, you will find all kinds of movies. Because I can remember in 77, when I was watching as a little kid, I think The Turning Point was nominated, which is a movie I had never heard of and still don't know what it is. There were all these movies where I'd sit there and go, I remember the year Chariots of Fire won. And I think that was 1981. And that was a huge upset because the movie that was supposed to win was Warren Beatty's Reds. And Reds was a movie that literally no one had seen. And it was a movie that's celebrating a communist. And so it was considered anti-American and blah, blah, blah. And it was like 3.5 hours long. But so when Chariots of Fire won, which is a movie that actually people had seen, it was woohoo, wow, maybe the Academy's getting it. But I think one of the reasons, Kelly, that people aren't watching the Academy Awards anymore is that people aren't really going to movies anymore. I think this goes back to Brent's topic. In streaming.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I've seen a couple of those movies. We saw Conclave in the theater. It was really fun. My son Jamie recommended it, and we went and saw it. And I thought, this is the best movie I've seen in a theater for I don't know how long. But I saw A Complete Unknown because I'm kind of a music weirdo and wanted to see the Bob Dylan biopic. I saw that on Hulu, and it came out on Hulu not long after it was in theaters. We saw Dune 2. Did we see that in a theater or not? I can't remember if we saw that in a theater or not. But we did go and see it, and I remember Dune 1 came out with a deal. We got HBO Max for the purpose of watching the first Dune movie the same day it was released in theaters, because HBO was saying their deal with Warner Brothers was going to be every Warner Brothers movie was going to be released simultaneously in theaters and on video, on streaming. And so we got HBO Max for the purpose of replacing going to the movie theater. They backed away from that because that business model does not right. Okay, Eliza Bennett says, I have a consensus tree piece on this. Oscar isn't just for normies, it's for celebrating art.
And I don't have a problem with that, except that's not what the Oscars have been historically. The Oscars have been to celebrate, I guess it was the art of movie making, but it was also the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. It was a show that was watchable. You have hosts that aren't funny. You have preachy speeches that are a rather new phenomena. And like to be the token Republican here, it's anti-average American values. You get up and talk about everything else. They've made movies, the Oscars, so that you have to meet certain requirements. You have to have a certain number of LGBTQ. You have to have a certain number of minorities and women. It's not about good cinematography. It's who can check all the boxes and make a movie at the same time.
I've got a request that you refresh your screen, Kelly, because there is a new consensus tree on there. There's a new topic from one of our listeners.
Let's go. The Oscars aren't for normies. Can you see it on there?
Yes. Can you click on that? I want to see what the camp statement is. We should let the Oscars be for celebrating art. If that doesn't map with popular movies, that is actually okay. Except Barbie was robbed.
And that goes against something you just said. The box office hasn't been that bad the last few years, coming back from the COVID time. We're not back to the huge numbers that were pre-COVID, but they're heading back up. We had a $2.5 billion box office. I'm sorry, an $8.5 billion box office in 2024, which is still down from 2019, but that's after 4 years of being almost nothing by comparison.
All right, so I've got a list here of movies that have every movie that has won Best Picture.
I'm looking at the same list.
Okay. So 79 was Kramer versus Kramer.
Yep.
1980.
Which, by the way, I went and saw Kramer versus Kramer, and I didn't think it was a bad movie. I just don't think it was the best movie of that year. But hey, I actually watched the movie. I don't know if they had to back then. Apocalypse Now should have won.
Yeah. A lot of people think that. Ordinary People won in 1980.
Which, again, decent choice. You look at the other movies that were up for consideration that year. They were movies that people watched, and it was exciting.
Chariots of Fire, we've talked about.
Yep.
Gandhi, Terms of Endearment, Amadeus, Out of Africa, Platoon.
And Out of Africa, Color Purple should have won.
The Last Emperor,
Great
Rain
movie.
Man, Driving
Great
Miss
movie.
Daisy.
Fantastic movie.
Okay, so where do you think they go off? I mean, the biggest robbery that everybody talks about is 1998 when Shakespeare in Love won instead of Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, that was a travesty.
Uh,
I and you know, I'll even go to 2000. I think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was a lot better movie than Gladiator.
So, Lord of the Rings:
I
Return of the King wins in 2003, and then I think these movies were none of these movies were box office hits for the next few years. You have $1 Million Baby, Crash, The Departed, No Country for Old Men, The Hurt Locker, Slumdog Millionaire, The King's Speech, The Artist.
Here,
And
let me stop you at The Hurt Locker. The Hurt Locker is when they started adding 9 more movies to Best Picture. So you had Avatar that year, you had The Blind Side, you had Inglourious Bastards, Up, to name a few of them. So The Hurt Locker, that was okay. There were still mainstream movies. District 9 were part of that 2009 class of Best Picture nominees.
Well, but so I think that gives people license to feel like, okay, we've included all of these popular movies, so that means we can vote for the artsy movie. Because I'm looking at all this, and it's 2003. Is Argo? I think was kind of a big hit.
Yeah, it was a good show.
But the rest of the 12 Years a Slave, Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, which is one frickin' weird movie. I saw that movie, but I think I was one of only 5 people to see it. Spotlight.
And I think it's weird. In 2014, they nominated 8 instead of 10.
They didn't feel like they had enough good movies to nominate 10.
Yeah.
So, Spotlight, which is my wife's absolute favorite movie. She's made all of her kids watch it multiple times.
What year was that?
2015.
Oh, yep.
But that wasn't really a huge hit. Moonlight was not a hit. The Shape of Water was not a hit. Green Book was not a hit. Parasite was not a hit. Nomadland, I'd never heard of it until right now.
And I think you can start looking at when the Academy Awards started dropping off about then. And I think you could make the case that there's been this history of celebrating movies, but it turned into celebrating art house movies, which is a dramatic shift in the American psyche around this time. And then again, this has started to be the preachy times.
All right, so
Dunkirk, by the way, should have won instead of Shape of Water. Dunkirk was fantastic.
Dunkirk was a great movie. All right, so comments is Conan is hilarious. You take that back for saying that the hosts suck because Conan was good. They've actually gone a long way toward making the Academy Award presentation shorter and more fun to watch. And I think there were years where the thing went on for like 5 hours, and they have capped it at 3 hours, and they really do move it much more quickly than they used to. Some of the hosts are hit and miss. One of my favorite years was the year David Letterman hosted, and it pretty much ended his run as the number one guy on late night because most people thought it was awful. And then all of a sudden, Jay Leno took over as the top host, and Letterman never recovered. And it was the Academy Awards hosting gig that did it to him.
Yeah.
But
2025 was this year was 3.5 hours. So they went overtime.
They went over, but that's still a whole lot shorter than it was in days gone by.
But in days gone by, they would get rid of all the things that nobody cared about and just focus on the big things. And that's what made it appealing. But now they're appealing to not even that. It's these niche films that nobody has seen that are nominated and win.
We have saying Parasite was a hit, just wasn't huge in the United States.
And I will accept that too.
I think that's probably true because my son, who made that comment, spent a semester in Korea, and I think isn't Parasite a Korean film?
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Well, so we now have we have a new camp that has arisen as a result of our conversation here, and that's the goal here. So I think I am going to go on to Canonizer and look at these camps. I'm going to share my screen as soon as I get this pulled up. But I think, so not an expert. You've got your camera off. Are you there with us? Which of these camps do you want to join?
You know,
I
this whole
joined-
time, I've just been thinking about relevance. And this is kind of similar to market demands of the streaming services. If the Academy wants to focus on niche art, then they're going to have a niche audience. And they're going to fade into obscure irrelevancy.
Yep.
But if they want to focus on what's the most popular and lean heavily into that, then we're going to go down the road of idiocracy. And the Academy Awards of 2030 is going to be Ass, which is just a movie of a guy farting.
What?
If you haven't watched the movie Idiocracy, you need to.
It's a hilarious movie. A great commentary.
Ass.
What a lovely movie. All right. Well, I have added. Okay, I am trying to add this to the stage. Well, I've got to remove this from the stage. I'm just learning how this works. I'm removing you, and I'm adding me. So there we are. This is. I'm looking at the consensus tree. I think I have been persuaded. Oh, so who said I love the Oscars? Can't wait for the nominations. Or is
I
just
wrote
one of
that. I wrote that as one of the options because I do know people that love the Oscars and they love niche films. They love artsy fartsy stuff, and it's like my indie record is much better than yours.
Well, I just added my support. I was convinced by one of our viewers that the Oscars aren't for normies. And so this reflects the current consensus. Eliza Bennett has created the camp that is the consensus camp. So in your face, guys, if you want something else, you got to have a more persuasive camp.
Well, Kelly, if you would join the camp, then we could at least be tied.
I'm on the Oscars are too preachy and they focus on niche
You're not
films.
supporting that camp yet.
No, I'm not going to support the Oscars aren't for normies.
No, I'm saying you're supporting the agreement camp. You aren't yet supporting the Oscars.
It says I'm supporting it. Well, let me see what I've done wrong.
Okay, I'm adding you to the. There's your. All right.
I'm making a new camp.
Oh, Mark comes in with the controversy.
I'm adding the camp.
Sorry, Brent, I'm with you.
That.
So we're at least tied for with Liza.
Okay.
And I don't know if this is an issue with this award ceremony specifically or with the Academy in general, but it doesn't represent cinema.
Do you want to share your screen, Mark?
No. I've got a lot of things open.
Well, you can share. This allows you to just share one
window.
Yeah,
just refresh it. Did you create a topic or camp? Did you say?
I just created that. Created my camps.
Okay. So
now
Kelly, can you're sharing right now? Can you refresh and let's see what Mark's camp is?
I'm sharing again. All right.
No,
let me
it doesn't represent cinema.
Let me get there. And All
Doesn't
right,
what
there
not,
you go.
what does that mean? Doesn't represent cinema. What do you mean by that, Mark?
I'm trying to organize my thoughts here a little bit. Because first and foremost, the Academy Awards is only focused on Academy films. And that excludes most films created every year. You're looking at an extremely small slice of cinema that is Academy United States films, essentially. You're
Hey,
throwing
they have a
away.
little segment called foreign films.
Wait, what?
They have a little. They have one best foreign film, don't they? For the whole rest of the world.
Do they really?
I
Yeah.
always thought they did.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a best foreign
Okay.
film award.
I think the bar for that would be pretty low, but just kidding. I mean, the thing is that like the award ceremony itself was supposed to be celebrating a year in cinema, the advances in it, of acting, of art, and of
Technology.
to what Kelly is probably leaning towards, public moviegoers, cinema culture, all of it. But the thing is that it's boring and it is self-congratulatory. And at the very best, it's just a giant useless market. It's just a giant advertisement at the end of the day. And quite frankly, a lot of people don't have time for that anymore. Well, they won't even care, even if it is focused only on things that were popular that year.
Okay.
I want to jump in because I think I might be able to expand on this. Maybe there are plenty of film festivals around the world that talk about artsy films,
Mhm.
and the Academy Awards is supposed to be something, or historically has been something much different than that. It was a star-studded gala, not some has been never seen, nobody's seen this show celebration. That's why you go to these other film festivals.
Well, cinema is also changing in the sense that it is now democratized by technology where people are able to make films much more cheaply, distribute them through unorthodox channels, distribute them online. And so, I mean, when you say Academy films, the rule for being eligible for an Academy Award is it has to play, I think, in a Los Angeles theater for 2 weeks before the end of the year. And given how democratized and different the media landscape is than it was 30 years ago, that seems to me to be a really antiquated way to do it. So I think you do have sort of a point there. But at the same time, a lot of the stuff that's made is garbage. Not garbage in the sense that it's just. I mean, it's technically not up to the same kind of standards. I mean, at what point do you start to include porn in some of this kind of thing? I mean, is there a rule that would exclude that as cinema? Or should there be a rule that excludes that as cinema?
I mean, it looks like you're starting to delve a little bit deeper into the comment Jamie asked of what is cinema.
Yes, I am a little bit. Well, but you're the guy that says it doesn't represent cinema. So the
I put that short as a title to make it easier for the camp title. What it really is doesn't represent cinema as a whole. Clearly, everything in there is cinema by definition. That's unarguable. But to take the viewpoint that the stuff that's at the Academy Awards is, well, one, the extreme is that's all that's important, is that misses the mark entirely. I don't think any of us have that much of a disingenuous view on it. But I think the reality is that its viewership is going down as in relationship in relation to the fact that U.S. cinema is also going down in relevancy, like as part of a broader industry shift.
Is that just me, or is Mark glitching? Am I glitching? Testing. Testing.
I'm fine. I don't hear any issues.
Okay. There was some glitching there, but I don't know where that came from. All right. Well, I think that this has been a good topic. There are some great comments. I think the Oscars is starting to show cinema even more now, more than ever. More people now have the ability to create a movie and create entertainment from their point of view.
But
So
clearly,
I
Snow
think
White,
that's
the
kinda
Snow White
interesting.
movie, if that's not Best Picture next year, then what are we even doing?
That checks all the boxes for a winning film.
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
That glitched out on me, but I see smiles. So, Mark, you said
Yeah.
something funny.
I'll repeat what he
All
said.
right.
He said, Mark said that if Snow White doesn't win Best Picture in 2026, then everything is for naught, because it's exactly checks all the boxes that a Oscar-winning film needs to do. I would just have everybody just go look up the rules to win Best Picture. They're astounding and they're silly, and I think it's cut into people's artistic abilities. And now instead of
All right.
a movie, you have a checkbox.
All right. Well, we are now. We want to keep these to around an hour. So, Mark, did you have a topic to raise here today? I think
I
we
did not include one
pounded this one into the ground. Oh, does that mean that I get to inflict my topic on you guys at last?
Oh. Quick, let's make a topic. Canada elections.
Canada elections. No, there it is. My children will love this because they've never ever heard me talk about this. Let's go back. Kelly, are you purposely not going to bring it up to avoid?
No, it's there.
There it is. Okay, so my topic is about Shakespeare authorship, which is obviously the most pressing topic in the history of the universe. The agreement statement is William Shakespeare is considered the greatest writer in the English language, and perhaps any language. A greater understanding of his life and background can only enrich our appreciation of his genius. Now, this is an issue that a lot of people, so you got their unorthodox, Stratfordian versus Orthodox. So unorthodox is two different camps. Is that right? Have people actually weighed in on this other than me?
That is
I'm going to start
astounding.
I'm going to pull mine up here and add it to the stage. Go back to the consensus tree. So I think part of the reason why people balk at this is they don't understand what it is that I'm saying. Okay, so the unorthodox statement says, there's a camp unorthodox that says the biography of the man from Stratford upon Avon, who is generally given credit for writing the plays, is wholly incompatible with the person who was Shakespeare, and no evidence during the Stratford man's lifetime suggests that he was a writer of any kind. It is therefore likely that someone else, or perhaps several other people, wrote the works attributed to William Shakespeare. Okay. So my camp that I have joined is William Shakespeare was the pseudonym of Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford. And I want to see what this camp says. Is that just a glitch? So I think this camp, I'm not sure why that camp exists because it doesn't have a statement and it's duplicating what was there before. Kelly and I had an offline conversation about this. And Kelly said, well, I believe Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. And whenever anybody says, I believe Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare, it says to me, they don't understand the point that I'm trying to make here. For Brent or Mark, do you have any thoughts on this before I launch off into a rant a little bit? Is this a topic that is just absolutely of no interest to you whatsoever?
It's not that it's not of no interest, it's that I haven't studied it. Even knowing you for a few years and having no excuse to have not dive into that rabbit hole, I just never have.
Well, just hearing what you said so far has sparked my interest more than I realized I would be interested in. And so I've gone in and delegated my support to you.
Oh, well, very nice. So there are two components to this. I have yet to meet someone who doesn't believe Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. I have not met, and I am not someone who doesn't think Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. What people say when they say Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare is that the man from Stratford upon Avon, who was William Shakespeare, wrote William Shakespeare. And that's a different thing. I think Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare the same way that Mark Twain wrote Mark Twain. Nobody would say Mark Twain didn't write Mark Twain. They would point out that Mark Twain was the pseudonym of a man named Samuel Clemens. But everyone would recognize that Samuel Clemens was Mark Twain. So nobody would have a hard time saying Mark Twain wrote Mark Twain. There are two elements to this question. And the first element is, okay, the man from Stratford upon Avon, was he William Shakespeare? And the second element was, if he was not William Shakespeare, who was? And the first part of that discussion, there really is an airtight case to be made that not only was William Shakespeare, which was how it was pronounced, and it was not spelled the same way the playwright spelled his name. William Shakespeare spelled his name. The only handwriting we have of William Shakespeare comes from six different signatures, all of which are unreadable scrawls. I'm going to have to see if I can pull those up here so you can see them. And all of which are spelled differently, which is really kind of strange because this is the greatest writer of all time, indisputably. You would think he would have figured out a standardized spelling for his own name, but he apparently did not. The most common, nowhere in records in Stratford upon Avon is his name spelled the same way as it is spelled in I'm opening this image in a new tab and I'm going to share this image. Nowhere in the records of Stratford upon Avon is his name spelled the same way it is spelled in of the playwright, with Shakespeare. Yeah, so let's see. I'm trying to just present or invite. How do I share my screen again? Dang me. Oh, I've got to stop that screen. There we go. Now I share the screen. And I'm sharing that. So take a look. That is the only handwriting we have of the man from Stratford upon Avon that people consider to be the greatest writer of all time. The top one looks like it's William Shandy. The lower one, most of them are illegible. This is a guy who wrote for a living and never once spelled his name the way the playwright spelled his name. At no point, William Shakespeare of Stratford upon Avon had nothing more than a grammar school education. The works of William Shakespeare include references to books and literature and paintings that would not have been available to the man from Stratford. There was no way he could have traveled outside of the country. And there's so many people, when they talk about this, they say, well, you just are a snob. You just can't stand the fact that a commoner, that just some guy from the sticks could rise up and be the greatest writer of all time. And my response to that is, I have no problem with somebody from the sticks rising up and becoming a great writer. There were a number of people that did it at the same time Shakespeare did. Ben Jonson, who's considered to be second only to Shakespeare in terms of his prowess, came from a very humble background. But we have a literary paper trail that shows us how he got there. Christopher Marlowe, who died very young, was very accomplished, wrote some great works, but we know and understand how he got there. The guy from Stratford, there are so many contradictions, and nobody around him thought he was a playwright. Nobody ever commented on his plays while he was alive. The first time that anything is linked to him as being a writer is in 1623. That was the publication of the first folio, which was a collection of everything Shakespeare ever wrote. And for the very first time, we have a picture of Shakespeare, and we have attribution to Shakespeare to being from Stratford, that he has a Stratford monument, and they call him the Sweet Swan of Avon, which is Stratford upon Avon. And so the theory is, I mean, everybody's like, well, how did he get away? Whoever wrote Shakespeare, how did they get away with hiding behind William Shakespeare? And it just, people don't understand that that's not what we're saying. I'm saying that nobody during William Shakespeare's lifetime would have linked him or did link him to the writings of William Shakespeare. I believe that the name William Shakespeare was chosen as a pseudonym. It's very often spelled with a hyphen, which is indicative of a pseudonym. And that after both the author who used the pen name and the man from Stratford with a similar name were dead, the royal family essentially decided that they didn't want these plays linked to their real author. And so they found somebody who had been dead for 7 years that nobody really knew, and they linked the plays to him, and that's where we are. All evidence that links William Shakespeare of Stratford to the works of William Shakespeare is posthumous. There is no evidence during Shakespeare's lifetime linking him to these plays.
And
that is
reference,
my weird passion. Say again?
That first reference you said in 1600 was the first reference. How long? When was Shakespeare alive? Or when?
So the timeline here. William Shakespeare of Stratford was born in 1564 and died in 1616. And Shakespeare plays originally came on the scene without any authorship attribution at all. And the first time the name William Shakespeare appears in print is in 1594 with the publication of Venus and Adonis, which was not a play, but a poem. William Shakespeare was known as a poet during that period, more than he was known as a playwright. After that poem appears, another poem that William Shakespeare's name is attached to, called The Rape of Lucrece, appears 2 years later. And then suddenly a flood of plays have William Shakespeare's name attached to them, many of them not plays written by William Shakespeare. That these plays would sell when the Shakespeare name was attached to them, but nobody showed up or objected when these plays were pawned off as Shakespeare's. Shakespeare himself didn't show up. Shakespeare himself never shows up on the scene. He's a phantom. He's nowhere to be found. And it's really bizarre because some playwrights, for instance, Ben Jonson, wrote a play called The Isle of Dogs in 1597. And it was considered so seditious that he was locked up in the Star Chamber, threatened to have his hand cut off, and every copy of the play was destroyed. We don't know what was in the play. We know the play existed, but it was considered so seditious that every copy of it was destroyed. This happened all the time. Censorship was rampant in Elizabethan England. And every playwright butted up against the Star Chamber, butted up against Elizabeth's enforcers. The Cecil family was sort of running it as a police state, with one exception, William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare's never questioned. William Shakespeare's never brought in. There was an attempt, essentially an Elizabethan January 6th, the Essex Rebellion. The Earl of Essex and the Earl of Southampton, who was the dedicatee of the two Shakespeare poems, orchestrated a plot to overthrow the crown. And they staged a version of a Shakespeare play, Richard II, that showed a dithering and ineffectual monarch, and said, this is Elizabeth. The Shakespeare play was the propaganda used to say, this is what Elizabeth is. They marched on the crown. The rebellion was put down swiftly. Everybody involved was executed, except for the Earl of Southampton. And even the actors who participated in the play that sparked the rebellion were brought in for questioning. But William Shakespeare never was. And the play itself was never censored. William Shakespeare never butted up against that. And the idea is that William Shakespeare, again, the case against the man from Stratford is far less speculative than the case for any alternative authors. My alternative author, and I think the broad consensus of an alternative author, is that William Shakespeare was Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, whose life is reflected in a whole number of plays. His father died when he was very young. His mother remarried very quickly. His life essentially is Hamlet is autobiographical. If you know the play Hamlet, you know the life of Edward de Vere. And he essentially was being paid by Queen Elizabeth to write propaganda for the crown. He was given a huge allowance of £1,000 a year, which was the equivalent of millions upon millions of dollars in today's money, in order to write essentially propaganda for the Queen, all of these history plays. And Edward de Vere died in 1604. Shakespeare plays stopped being produced around this time with any real frequency. In 1608, a book of sonnets is published that are attributed to William Shakespeare, and the dedication is to our ever-living writer. Ever-living is an honorific that is given to people who are not living. You can't be ever-living until you're dead. And so in 1608, the publication indicates that whoever wrote these sonnets is dead, whereas the man from Stratford still had another 8 years to live. But the man from Stratford, Shakespeare plays aren't being produced. He goes back to Stratford. He's fined for hoarding grain during a famine. He does nothing that's literary. Nobody's paying any attention to him. And when he dies, absolutely nobody notices, which is really bizarre, because when far lesser poets die, there are huge tributes from all of these other writers all over the place. You can find all these dedications to Edmund Spenser and to Ben Jonson and to all these people you've never heard of. But when the greatest writer of all time dies, supposedly, nobody cares. Nobody buries him in Westminster Abbey, where all these other writers are buried. He ends up in a tiny little grave in a tiny church in his home village, and nobody cares. Nobody pays any attention to it. So I just think it's far more fascinating to understand the plays of Shakespeare when you understand the man who wrote them. And Shakespeare was Shakespeare. Shakespeare was not. That's the end of my long, lengthy rant.
Cool.
Who did I convince everybody? All in?
While you were doing that, I was actually reading about Shakespeare, and I just like to read a couple of paragraphs. This is, of course, from Wikipedia because I was trying to find a summary, but I can look at the footnote here. Nearly all academic Shakespeareans believe that the author referred to as Shakespeare was the same William Shakespeare who was born in Stratford upon Avon in 1564 and who died there in 1616. He became an actor and shareholder in the Lord Chamberlain Men, later King's Men, the playing company that owned the Globe Theatre, the Blackfriars Theatre, and exclusive rights to produce Shakespeare's plays. Shakespeare scholars see no reason to suspect that the name was a pseudonym or that the actor was a front for the author. Contemporary records identify Shakespeare as the writer. Playwrights such as Ben Jonson, Christopher Marlowe, and others came from similar background, and no contemporary is known to have expressed doubts about Shakespeare's authorship. While information about some aspects of Shakespeare's life is sketchy, this is true of many other playwrights of the time. Of some, next to nothing is known. Others, such as Jonson, Marlowe, and John Marston, are more fully documented because of their education, close connections with the court, or brushes with the law. So, while Jim, I appreciate your passion, I'm going to go with the majority of Shakespearean scholars on this.
This is just an interesting subject to get worked up on, given the historical contents. With the lack of additional, or the need for discovery of additional primary and secondary written sources, the other theories are just, they're mostly not falsifiable. So what's the point? It's like we can. Well, I mean, there's a lot to be gained. I get that, but I'm not convinced that this is I don't even know where I'm going with this. This is a topic that should be argued, because the only way it can go forward from here is if we get new evidence, and that's probably not going to happen.
But I appreciate Jim's passion, and he's obviously given it a lot of thought and study. So Good job, Jim.
Yeah, and that's
all right. Well, to conclude then, go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, that's the way things. That's what theoretical science is. Theoretical history is everyone gives it their best shot, and eventually, when the millennium comes up and we know the perfect history of everything, we'll know who is right and who's wrong. That'll be.
Until then, we have Canonizer.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing to round this out. So there was a guy on TikTok that made fun of this, and I made my one and only TikTok video in response to it. And I think it goes to some of what you were talking about, Kelly, there, because when you read something where it says nobody expressed doubts about his authorship during his lifetime, I would absolutely agree with that. But you have to question the premise of what you're talking about. I would argue that nobody would have even considered that the man was from Stratford was William Shakespeare during his lifetime. There would have been no reason to doubt Shakespeare's authorship, because nobody was associating Shakespeare authorship with the man from Stratford. So I'm going to share this because I think this is probably more interesting than what I've said so far. I am going to share a video.
But that
I
said,
made here.
I got to run. I'm looking forward to watching that, but I got to take off.
All right.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay.
Let's wrap things up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kelly.
Here we
See
go.
y'all.
Can you see this?
No, I can't.
You can only hear it, right? There
now
it
I
is.
can see it.
Okay.
And literary scholars is that Shakespeare was Shakespeare.
Of course Shakespeare was Shakespeare. That's me. Nobody says otherwise. The question is not, was Shakespeare Shakespeare? The question is, who was Shakespeare? Take Mark Twain, for instance. Marcus A. Twain, to be specific. He was mining coal in Indiana at the same time Samuel Clemens was writing Huckleberry Finn, a book attributed to Mark Twain. But Marcus A. Twain was not Mark Twain. Samuel Clemens was Mark Twain. The name Mark Twain is widely known to be a pen name, a pseudonym. But even though an Indiana coal miner was born with the name Mark Twain and Samuel Clemens wasn't, nobody would say the Mark Twain who wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer wasn't Mark Twain. So it is with Shakespeare. Nobody believes Shakespeare wasn't Shakespeare. They just think the guy from Stratford-upon-Avon wasn't Shakespeare, just as Marcus A. Twain, the coal miner, wasn't Mark Twain. We know next to nothing about Marcus A. Twain, but we know quite a bit about the guy from Stratford. The problem is that none of it lines up with what we know about the poet and playwright who used the name William Shakespeare as his own pseudonym. To begin with, the Stratford guy never called himself Shakespeare. All we have of his handwriting are 6 shaky signatures with 5 different spellings, including Shakespeare, Shakespeare, and Shakespeare. If Mr. Shakespeare were indeed the greatest writer of all time, you'd think he'd settle on a single spelling for his own name. You'd also find it odd that the world's greatest writer had an illiterate father and an illiterate daughter, neither of whom could sign their own names at all. But such was the case for Mr. Shakespeare of Stratford. So while the argument as to who was behind the Shakespeare pseudonym may never be settled, the evidence that it was not and could not have been William Shakespeare of Stratford is pretty overwhelming. But Yuval tries to pretend otherwise through a process of
holy cherry-picking, Batman.
Yuval insists that the idea that Shakespeare must have been well-traveled
is a little bit ridiculous because his writing depicts precisely the opposite.
No, it really doesn't. The only way you can say it does is through
cherry-picking.
Yuval's cherry-picked examples start with this one.
Winter's Tale by Shakespeare takes place in Bohemia, which is described as taking place on the seacoast. Doesn't make any sense because Bohemia is landlocked.
It is now, yes. But as Britannica.com points out, despite its landlocked location, there were brief periods in the Middle Ages during which Bohemia had access to the Baltic and Adriatic sea coasts, which no doubt was on William Shakespeare's mind when he set much of his play The Winter's Tale there. Speaking of The Winter's Tale, that's the play where Shakespeare mentions an artist named Giulio Romano. It's the only shout-out Shakespeare gives to any artist in any of his plays. Giulio Romano painted a series of murals depicting the Trojan War. Here's his portrait of Achilles, that for Achilles' image stood his spear, gripped in an armed hand, himself behind, was left unseen, save to the eye of mind. A hand, a foot, a face, a leg, a head, stood for the whole to be imagined. This is a perfect description of Achilles here. You can only see his hand, foot, face, and leg, and the rest has to be imagined by the mind's eye. This description is offered up by the title character in Shakespeare's poem, The Rape of Lucrece, along with lengthy and spot-on accurate descriptions of the rest of Giulio Romano's Trojan War murals. Shakespeare had to have seen these murals to be able to describe them in such detail. Shakespeare must have had access to them. Mr. Shakespeare could not have had access to them. That means Mr. Shakespeare could not have been William Shakespeare. This idea of access will come up again and again, and every time it does, it will demonstrate that Mr. Shakespeare could not have been William Shakespeare. Let's talk about books, for instance. Yuval thinks it's ludicrous that we should expect books to show up in Mr. Shakespeare's will.
He also didn't list pants in his will. No food was mentioned either. Is it our contention that he never ate?
Zing. But even people who think Mr. Shakespeare was William Shakespeare acknowledge how strange it is that no books show up in his last will and testament. Books were rare and expensive, and the few people who owned them were sure to put them in their wills. John Fletcher, Shakespeare's collaborator on The Two Noble Kinsmen, listed his books at the top of his will, despite also not mentioning pants or food further down the list. Shakespeare's works draw from legions of books to which Mr. Shakespeare could not have had access. Consider the Decameron, a collection of 14th century Italian novellas from which William Shakespeare lifted the plot for All's Well That Ends Well. These were not translated into English or even published in England until 1620, 4 years after Mr. Shakespeare had died. To steal the All's Well That Ends Well plot, William Shakespeare would have had access to the Decameron, which meant he had to have traveled to Italy to read it in the original Italian. Mr. Shakespeare could not have done this any more than Marcus A. Twain could have done this. So when Yuval spends the latter half of his video showing that people talked about William Shakespeare as a writer and everyone knew William Shakespeare was a writer, and shows people saying how this proves that everyone knew William Shakespeare was William Shakespeare and nobody doubted William Shakespeare was William Shakespeare, he's missing the point entirely. Nobody doubted Shakespeare was Shakespeare for the same reason nobody doubted Mark Twain was Mark Twain. The first evidence linking Mr. Shakespeare to William Shakespeare appeared 7 years after Mr. Shakespeare was dead. There is no reason to believe that during Mr. Shakespeare's lifetime, anyone thought Mr. Shakespeare was the guy who wrote King Lear and Hamlet any more than people thought Marcus A. Twain wrote Huckleberry Finn. This is why Yuval's concluding ad hominem rings hollow.
In an argument that was born out of classism. It all started with a lot of people just refusing to accept that someone with Shakespeare's background could have written the plays that he did.
Really? Then why does nobody say the same thing about Marlowe or Johnson? Both came from very humble backgrounds, similar to Mr. Shakespeare's, and nobody has a problem accepting they wrote the works attributed to them. That's because they left behind evidence that they wrote for a living. In fact, all of Shakespeare's contemporaries left behind some kind of literary paper trail to prove they were writers. It wouldn't take much. You don't need to find Shakespeare's handwriting on a manuscript of Macbeth. You just need a letter to or from someone where he mentions his writing. Even just a receipt from a playhouse of payment for writing a play. All the other guys have at least something. Mr. Shakespeare has nothing at all. Now that's actually a paraphrase of what Mark Twain said. No, not Marcus A. Twain, but Samuel Clemens Mark Twain. In addition to Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain wrote a book called Is Shakespeare Dead? I now quote Clemens Twain's description of Mr. Shakespeare at length. About him, you can find nothing. Nothing of even the slightest importance. Nothing worth the trouble of stowing away in your memory. Nothing that even remotely indicates that he was ever anything more than a distinctly commonplace person, a manager, an actor of inferior grade, a small trader in a small village that did not regard him as a person of any consequence and had forgotten all about him before he was fairly cold in the grave. He hadn't any history to record. There is no way of getting around that deadly fact, and no sane way has yet been discovered of getting around its formidable significance. Marcus A. Twain couldn't have said it better himself. All right, there you go. That was my magnum opus.
Yeah, you should link that in the camp statement.
I will do that. I'm going to put that to my TikTok account. I've never used my TikTok account except for that.
Yeah,
so anyway,
have a link to
all
that.
right. Well, we've gone on a little bit longer than we should have. Go ahead.
I was just
Mark, were you saying something?
waiting for the sign off, actually.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to say anything.
Cool. Yeah, that was a fun
all
one.
right. That was fun. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for participating. And to everybody else, we will see you next time on Consensus with Canonizer. And I am trying to play the outro video, but I don't seem to. Yeah, play this.
All right, just that.
How do I end stream? Play